feel like America has this power and they're just simply not doing it because they love Iran or something? Like they want Iran to have the enriched uranium? What a stupid demand this is. It's been 39 fucking days. Obviously, if America could do it without putting boots on the ground and engaging in potentially a decades-long conflict with Iran that will be devastating for every party involved in it and all of the other forces in the region, that will only continue the pain that the global energy markets experience. Like, in the absence of that, it's clearly not in the cards for Donald Trump and the American forces to go in and like take out the enriched uranium. There's one way to do it, destroying the global energy markets permanently. They're going to go back into it. They're going to go back into it. But there is the Financial Times reporting that I'm obviously leaning into that says U.S. directly pushed Pakistan to arrange a ceasefire deal while talking about escalation. So they were on the timeline. They were posturing in this, barbaric manner, but behind closed doors, they absolutely were begging for a deal. They were begging to stop the bleeding, right? It makes sense. It makes sense when you think about the war objectives that were not accomplished at all. And not only that, but also Donald Trump personally admitted that initially that they thought that the Iranian demands were quite reasonable, that there was the workings of a negotiation, right? There's the workings of a actual negotiation there. And the Iranian demands, the 10-point demands that they've made, have not changed since day one. So what changed? Well, what changed is the calculation, right? This doesn't mean that Iran has unlimited striking capabilities, because I have seen a lot of people, some of the resistance Twitter that constantly talks about the IRGC or Hamas or any number of different resistance fronts as though they are pawns in this game that they're playing on the internet in a way that's not dissimilar to how like the pro Ukraine, pro NATO Twitter talks about Ukrainians and how they have to consistently wage war. Resistance Twitter was mad. They're like, what are you doing? You need to blow up Israel further. Like, this is so stupid. And it's like, Iran doesn't have unlimited munitions. And the Iranian government's primary focus is still to maintain sovereignty, right? And ensure that their people are not being slaughtered. So they understand their limitations as well, which is, I think, the reason why they were fine. They thought that maybe they had established sufficient military deterrence. They had done enough economic damage that America would actually finally come to the table and treat them as a serious partner. Okay? Iran doesn't have unlimited munitions, and Iran doesn't have unlimited appetite for death and destruction. You have to understand that. They are thinking about this very clearly. They've demonstrated sufficient restraint in the past, and now they've demonstrated sufficient military deterrence. But they obviously interpret the battle conditions in a way that's a lot... in a way that's much more strategic than random Twitter users, okay? I don't think their capacity plays part in the specific war at all. No, there's a limit. As long as the war wages on, there's also a lot of economic damage that they're taking, okay? Their facilities are being destroyed. Their railways are being bombed by Israel, which is what happened yesterday. They don't want their power plants to fucking to be bombed into oblivion. That is not just tremendous economic damage, but that will cause a lot of deaths. Okay? So from their perspective, they've been able to show the world that they have the capability to force America to concede. Whichever, from this point on, as long as America abides by these conditions, then they're good. Now they can rebuild, right? That was the goal. Their primary focus here is to ensure that there's sanctions relief and to ensure that America actually restrains Israel so they can have some regional stability. It's clear that is the goal. We'll see how much appetite America has for continued death and destruction. Unless they actually threaten to withdraw from the talks, it just sounds like impotent whining, which actually invites more violations, says Matthew Petty. And I think there's some truth to that, because it's very clear that Israel is not interested in abiding by these conditions. And given that Israel has always played the role of spoiler here, you have to make it very clear that if you're Iran, you have to make it very clear that, like, you have to restrain Israel. Okay. Galibaf released this statement on the violation of the 3 key clauses of the 10-point proposal agreed framework before the start of the negotiations. The deep historical distrust we hold towards the United States stems from its repeated violations of all forms of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been replaced once again. As the President of the United States has clearly stated in his Truth, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a workable basis on which to negotiate in the main framework for these talks. However, 3 clauses of this proposal have been violated so far. Number 1, non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment that Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif also explicitly referred to and declared as an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions, effective immediately. This includes anywhere and everywhere place here. On the American side, it might be strategic miscommunication or it might be genuine miscommunication. Regardless, the entry of an intruding drone into Iranian airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lar in the Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting further violation of Iranian airspace, and the denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. Now, the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began. In such a situation, a bilateral ceasefire negotiations is unreasonable. If you understand that your enemy does not respond to anything but force, does not respond to anything but military deterrence, that's the only way that they engage in restraint. You have to go back to what's been working for you. Okay? And like I've said, I think there are international partners here that have to play a much larger role in demanding that America restrain Israel, or maybe even demand Israel cease its attempts if they want the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened again, right? But considering how much Israel firsters have been frustrated when the ceasefire was even released, it doesn't seem to be the case that there's enough appetite internally in the American government to go back to implementing some sort of ceasefire here. I think it almost feels like a repeat of Russian failures and a repeat of even the Western agitation and the Western interest in continuing the maximalist demands being made on their side with the unjustifiable and illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I don't know. I don't know where we go, but what I can tell you is that the Strait of Hormuz is no longer open for business. I'm happy that the worst possible outcome has been avoided. Donald Trump engaging in the nuclear option, or the worst possible outcome of Donald Trump blowing up the energy grid in its entirety in Iran, has been avoided for the time being. So that's good, especially because that was the threat. But it's obvious that there are a lot of forces that are frustrated by this. Here is some of them. Eli Afriat says, the time has come. Instead of Israel and the U.S. eliminating the regime is bombing Israel. Dear Trump, what did you do all this for? E. Fatlo says, the ceasefire is disappointing. At the end of the day, the people of the West have prioritized their own needs over the liberation of the people of Iran. I don't have enough fingers to count the amount of people who have ranted at me about gas prices for the last few weeks. Kosher says, I don't know how to feel about this. Noah Magid says, this makes me sick. Dr. Eli David says, what the fuck? Trump just shared a Rakshi's post that he accepted the regime's 10-point proposal. As a reminder, here's the 10-point proposal. This, of course, will be seen as weakness by the entire Middle East, says Yoav Kaufman. A ceasefire is a very bad idea for the future, for the Iranian people, for Israel and the USA, and basically the whole civilization. Oriel, I don't like it at all. This is a weak move and a wrong move. Finish the job. Terminate the regime. Noah Magid, I don't give a fuck about the Strait of Hormuz. Daniel Rubenstein, Iran has not conceded anything. Spring in Iran. I'm so angry, dejected, and heartbroken right now. Fuck. Trump instantly went from hero to zero, says Oren Haas. Are you disappointed with the ceasefire? Asks Vivid Prowess, all the way from India. Noah Magid again. I'm disgusted. A fake ceasefire with terrorists while we're in shelters, missiles over our heads, while millions of innocent Iranians have lost hope. Yoav Kaufman, what good does a ceasefire do for anyone but Iran? Donald Trump, fine. Here's a ceasefire. Islamic Republic presses send on ballistic missiles to Israel. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's very obvious. It's very obvious that the Israeli population was not very happy about this, or at least some of the mouthpieces. Not very happy about the ceasefire. They wanted the death and destruction campaign to continue. They wanted to kill more Iranians. They wanted to destabilize Iran. They wanted to destroy Iran. And they don't care if the rest of the fucking planet collapses into this massive energy crisis. Very selfish. Okay? Unbelievably selfish. Why are we not telling Israel to suck it? We are the United States of America. We are the hegemonic superpower, at least for the time being. Why don't we act like it? All of this, of course, erodes the confidence that even some of Israel's most loyal supporters have from the American side of things. So, nevertheless, we continue. We continue the battle. The battle that's waging.
First,
here's what J.D. Vance had to say.
First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. First of all,
this also makes it virtually impossible to deal with the United States of America or Israel. If you're a foreign adversary, if you're a nation in the periphery, how the fuck can you ever trust America to hold its word? Like, it's crazy. This is a very different dynamic. We live in a different world now. 39 days ago, we existed in a totally different reality. We are no longer in that reality. And I don't think people in positions of power at the highest ranks in the American administration recognize that. Okay? I don't think they recognize that at all. Meanwhile, Shabazz Sharif openly stated ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon. How many times will we have to keep quoting the direct words of Trump Vance teams as mediator? It is insane the low regard these people hold us in. The United States literally texted Prime Minister Sharif what to say on Twitter, and it included Lebanon. Exactly. We know it. We know they copy pasted it. It's ridiculous, right? It's totally ridiculous. It's sloppy misinformation that doesn't even work any longer. I think people have hardened their positions against Israel and against Israel's malignant influence on American foreign policy and sometimes even domestic policy, as a matter of fact. And there's no way to change that dynamic. But what also doesn't make sense is that America is still operating as though it has the capability of doing unlimited death and destruction. It has the capabilities of achieving its strategic military goals, and they're just simply not doing that. But they could, right? Like, you talk like this, and you act as though there's miscommunication. You say it's propaganda only if you actually have the military might to back it up. And it's very clear, given that America was consistently demanding a ceasefire, that they also, at a certain point, recognize that they don't have that capacity any longer. So on the one hand, they're still behaving like they could bring Iran to heel. But also, on the other hand, they don't have the force to show it. Or at least they don't have the appetite for further death and destruction, especially while Iran continues to close the Strait of Hormuz and dominate what takes place in the energy markets, or has a say in what takes place in the energy crisis that will unfold. It's clear, and Myrov is correct. Netanyahu will absolutely use Lebanon to torpedo this after defense officials made clear Hezbollah disarmament is not a realistic goal in this current operation. So we know the reason the press on it is for domestic politics, but it's not just domestic politics. I think this is like Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu is not just like responsive to like domestic pressures here. I think this is the overall goal, is like they're pretty open about it. Like, they think Iran is far weaker than it's ever been. The Iranian axis of resistance, the Iranian-backed axis of resistance, have been diminished in its capacity to restrain Israel militarily. That is true, right? So they think this is the only time where they can ever do this. This is the last possible moment for them, especially because what they did in the process caused tremendous anger towards Israel, and they've lost their base of support in the Western populations. No one will ever see Israel the same ever again, and therefore it's going to be much more difficult for these countries to continue being reliable allies to Israel, both on the political front, where they can offer political cover in the United Nations, or even when it comes to offering military aid to Israel directly. So this is their last shot. That's the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu wants to sully this deal, because he wants to keep dominating Iran. And we've already known, because I read pieces of this New York Times article yesterday. We know that this was always like the Israeli goals that they suggested to Donald Trump in an effort to get him into pulling the trigger was a lie. It was built around complete lies. The idea that this would be just like Venezuela, demonstrable lie. Right? The idea that they could foment enough instability internally to destabilize the regime if it didn't turn into like a Venezuela-style operation where they decapitate the existing leadership and the new leadership that comes in is much more pliant to American demands. Also a lie. The idea that they could successfully attrit Iranian strike capabilities against the Gulf and Israel. Also a lie. That didn't happen. The idea that Iran wouldn't even strike the Gulf states was immediately disproven. Right? So here we are.
In the region, and a lot of moving parts. Guys?
Trey, so you obviously were reporting there on strikes that were still coming into Israel. There are reports that strikes are still happening in the region. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this morning there were reports of explosions on 2 Iranian islands and at least 1 oil facility off the coast of Iran. an indication that the United States or Israel is still conducting airstrikes against the Iranian regime. But it also comes amid new incoming fire toward Gulf countries. Both Kuwait and the UAE have reported dozens of ceasefire violations. We're talking about drones and missiles being launched over the Persian Gulf toward these countries. And so it raises questions about if this ceasefire is actually in place, if this is an issue of getting the command down to some of these lower IRGC officials in the south of the country. But what we have seen in the aftermath of that announcement by President Trump is a variety of ceasefire violations by the Iranians that has included ballistic missile fire toward Israel and drone and cruise missile attacks toward Gulf countries.
So, Trey, speak to the enriched uranium. It still remains a key issue in all of this. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I've been talking with Israeli officials this morning, and they have been relatively quiet, simply responding, we need to get the job done. They raise a lot of questions about Iran's enriched uranium and questions about if this will be able to be addressed at the negotiating table. They pointed out that nothing has changed from the early days of Operation Epic Fury. And you remember U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff talking about how the Iranians first entered into negotiations before this war began, saying that they had enough highly enriched uranium to create 11 nuclear bombs. Israeli officials are asking, where is that enriched uranium? And if the United States believes that as a result of these 2 weeks, they'll be able to get a deal that addresses this nuclear threat. One official said, we don't want Iran to turn into North Korea. And there are serious questions that still remain about the ability to secure that highly enriched uranium, the main reason that this operation began.
Trey, there are two things in the 10-point proposal that are really the biggest red flags, according to all the articles I've read and according to us. Number one is the acceptance of the enrichment. They want to continue to enrich uranium. We can never allow them to do that. In fact, we want to go in and try to get that enriched uranium that is buried underground. So, but then I'm reading...
That question is how? Like, if we have the capability to do so, why haven't we done it? You know? Everybody talks about what we should be doing, but at the end of the day, it literally turns into, don't siege Leningrad, just take it. Okay, all the armchair generals on television just keep demanding that America do something that is clearly outside of their capabilities. Because if it was within their capabilities, they would do it. Like, do we feel like America has this power and they're just simply not doing it because they love Iran or something? Like they want Iran to have the enriched uranium? What a stupid demand this is. It's been 39 fucking days. Obviously, if America could do it without putting boots on the ground and engaging in potentially a decades-long conflict with Iran, that will be devastating for every party involved in it and all of the other forces in the region. That will only continue the pain that the global energy markets experience. Like, in the absence of that, it's clearly not in the cards for Donald Trump and the American forces to go in and take out the enriched uranium. There's one way to do it, or there was rather one way to do it. It had happened in the past. And that was with the JCPOA. If you want to restrain Iran's nuclear-grade enriched uranium capacity, if you want to restrain Iran's nuclear capacity, there was one way that we had successfully done that, right? It was with the JCPOA. Barack Obama did it. Donald Trump ripped it apart. It's clear that there's no other outcome here. And it shouldn't take... tens of billions, almost $100 billion of loss and the loss of American troops from the American perspective, because they clearly don't care about the people that they're killing. But it shouldn't take all of that for America to finally come to that conclusion. And it seems to me like America is still not at that conclusion, even if behind closed doors, they're communicating as though they've reached that conclusion. Because that's the other element here. Behind closed doors, they're begging for a deal. America is, right? In public, they're saying, oh, Iran is begging us for a deal. It's over for Iran. We've destroyed them. Look at how mighty our military is, right? But the reality of the matter is they understand that they don't have the capability to do this. They don't have the power to do this without engaging in a potential decades-long boots-on-the-ground invasion of a country that is much larger than any other country that we've invaded, that has 93 million people in it, many armed. And unlike Afghanistan or unlike Iraq, there's also clearly a strategic choke point that they are controlling. Elon Levy says if President Trump lets the Iranians charge a toll for ships in the Strait of Hormuz, then every time you fill up your car at the pump, you will put money straight in the pockets of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This will be a humiliating disaster for the United States. Mortaza says this is hilarious because Israel is currently inflicting a global economic crisis on the world by continuing the war and even overriding any attempt to ceasefire and generating extreme anger in the process by people far from the conflict whose material interests are being harmed. Now that there's an obvious split emerging between the United States and Israeli positions, foreign countries can safely engage in economic boycotts, derecognition of passports, and other measures targeting Israel until it ceases the war without having to confront Washington. That is what has to happen. There's also the other side of this, obviously, the Democrats and the prominent Democrats that are supposed to be the prominent Democrats that are supposed to be like celebrating the fact that Donald Trump is retreating from the absolute worst elements of his goals, absolute worst goals that he had of like death and destruction, full blown genocide campaign. Chris Murphy went on CNN and was like, "Oh, this ceasefire is unbelievable. I hope it's not real. I hope it's not real at all."
Stand out here. One, the safe passage that Trump is saying is going to be provided.
This is what he said last night, and then he continued to say even more unhinged things.
Weeks as part of this, kind of the central part of it, through Hormuz. They're saying is possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces, which obviously implies that Iran controls the strait. And then from the National Security Council, they say this confers upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing in terms of them regulating passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So what do you hear in all this?
I mean, listen, who knows what's going on? Donald Trump lies every single day. Clearly, he's not telling the truth. But if you accept even part of the Iranian statement, Donald Trump has agreed to give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz. That is extraordinary. If you go deeper into the statement from the Iranian National Security Council, they claim that Trump has also agreed to Iran's right to enrichment, to suspend all sanctions against Iran, and to allow Iran to keep their missile program, their drone program, and their nuclear program. Now, who knows if any of that is true, but if at the very least this agreement gives Iran the right to control the strait, that is cataclysmic for the world. And it is just stunning that that's...
Like, how can Democrats not understand that this is horrible messaging, right? Like, this literally proves what I've been saying all along, what we've been seeing all along, which is the idea that Democrats are not actually against destroying Iran, blowing up Iran, and waging war with Iran. They just get to sit there and act as though this wasn't in the cards for them. This wasn't their desire at all. This is no different than the same energy presented by Chuck Schumer in that famous Taco Trump. Trump always chickens out. If you're going to cut a side deal and negotiate with Iran without telling us, like, that's bullshit. You have to bomb them. It's the same shit. And this is the most transparent version of that sentiment, where instead of saying, look, we should have never gotten into this predicament to begin with, and although it's a worse position overall for Donald Trump, I'm glad that there's finally a pathway towards a ceasefire, long-lasting peace in the region. But instead of saying that, they're saying we could have done it better. We could have continued this war in a more effective manner. Or saying Donald Trump should continue this war in a more effective manner to absolutely destroy the Iranian nuclear capabilities. Like, there's no alternative here. They don't even present the alternative that Democrats famously advanced. Use the JCPOA. Say this is a worse deal overall from an American perspective than even the JCPOA, But it doesn't matter. Like it's clear that we have to negotiate with these people. It's clear that we have to engage with Iran in diplomacy rather than constantly warmongering. All of this is unnecessary. All of this was unnecessary. We learned a hard lesson. But as you know, as people with clear minds and good conscience, we should now turn around and say, all right, we're just gonna diplomatically engage with Iran. Commend Donald Trump even for following through on this, regardless of how tyrannical he is. But they're not doing that. What they're doing instead is agitating Trump. And what they don't realize is this makes them look consistent. This makes them look like cowards, makes them look weak. Okay? To the average person, they might not care about what happens to the Iranian people, but they don't like that the war is continuing and their gas prices are going up. And the Democrats are supposed to be in opposition to that, right? At least they're trying to communicate their opposition to that. But when they come out, when a ceasefire is imminent, and they say, oh, well, this is a massive failure for Trump. What the fuck are you doing? You should, you didn't achieve any of the strategic goals, and don't actually provide any counter or don't actually commend even an attempt towards diplomacy, even if Donald Trump is inconsistent on that front and most likely will not pursue diplomacy and try to create a long-lasting ceasefire here, long-lasting stability in the region. You're basically saying to the average person that's watching, to your base, is that you would be more violent than Donald Trump. You would have done a much better job of bringing Iran to heel, utilizing the same resources that Donald Trump is utilizing right now. And that's fucking bullshit. This is the major problem. Democrats are not in disagreement with killing Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Democrats are not in disagreement overall with engaging Iran militarily, right? They actually want it, and they like that Trump did it, and now they can act as though they were always in opposition to it. But even then, they don't present a strong enough opposition. They don't actually try to get people on the record with the War Powers Resolution when they should have. Right now, they're talking about it, but they should have done this months ago at this point, right? And they consistently say, oh, it's the process. It's the process that we disagree with. You didn't ask us for advice. You didn't ask us for confirmation. Fuck the process. You should be undermining the argument in its entirety. Why are we waging war with Iran to begin with? It's unfucking believable. And while Americans, like I said, are maybe not as careful or considerate about the everyday existence of ordinary Iranians and what we're doing to them right now, they do see their tax dollars light on fucking fire, and they do know what it looks like when they're paying, $20 extra at the pump. They see that. They see that as a negative impact, and they also tie this back directly to Israel. They know that we're waging this war because this is Israel's goals that we're accomplishing. Okay? So for liberals to try to frame this as like we would have actually accomplished Israel's war better than Trump, well, that's a fucking idiotic argument to present. You look silly. You're not even utilizing the moment. You're not even taking advantage of the moment to set a clear distinction between yourself and the Trump administration. I can't believe it. They're proving exactly what I've been saying all along. Well, we've been saying all along. Democrats, having spent 5 weeks doing nothing but silently go along with Trump's barbaric war, are now complaining that he chickened out. They are going on cable news and lamenting the fact that Trump didn't commit a genocide tonight. Deeply, deeply unserious people. Scum, even. They're doing the same technique again. They're saying, diet fascism. We would have done restrained fascism, diet fascism. We would have done more organized fascism.
2-week ceasefire is insufficient. We need a permanent end to Donald Trump's reckless war of choice, which is why House Democrats have demanded that Speaker Mike Johnson immediately reconvene the House back into session so we can move a War Powers Resolution that will end this conflict permanently.
That seems unlikely to happen. What do you actually think is going to happen in this 2-week period? What do you need to, assuming that doesn't happen, what do you need to see happen or want to see happen in this 2-week period?
Assuming it doesn't happen this week, we will go back into session next week and we will present a War Powers resolution as soon as it becomes available to us to do so as a matter of privilege on the House floor. All we need are a handful of Republicans to join us. The American people strongly oppose this reckless war of choice and know that we should not be spending billions of dollars to drop bombs in Iran while Republicans and Donald Trump are unwilling to spend a dime to actually make life more affordable for the American people, including but not limited to by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. It's unbelievable in terms of the priorities, and yet we've seen this president's behavior unhinged, unpresidential, unconscionable, including the messages that he's communicated to the American people over the last few days.
Yes, Dana Fesh talked about me. I know. I'll cover that. I will get I will get into that in a little bit. Okay.
2-week ceasefire is.
Yeah. Calling for a war powers resolution after the ceasefire announcement is funny, but it will still backfire on Hakeem Jeffries, because the reason why he's calling for it after the ceasefire is because it's over, right? By his calculation, this is the least effective time to demand this. However, given the tendency of Israel to ruin ceasefires, even though he said this last night, that ceasefire is not happening any longer. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. So now he accidentally backed himself into a corner where he unironically has to do the right thing. Fantastic. So expect him to turn around and say, all right, maybe now is not the time for ceasefire later down the line, or hold off on, not the ceasefire, sorry, hold off on demanding a war powers resolution. Because from his perspective, now would have been the perfect time to make it seem like he's against Donald Trump's unnecessary wars of choice. Okay? So much for the wouldn't be just as bad shit from libs. I know. It's very, very frustrating that so many liberals are stuck on the optics of the situation and refuse to recognize that our electeds, our representatives, are not representing our interests. And that's precisely the reason why they're pushing. That's precisely the reason why they're pushing back on the war powers resolution. But Chris Murphy had a back and forth with Adam Johnson that I thought was really good and really illustrative of the problems that I see with the way liberals are communicating on this. Adam Johnson says liberal messaging that, 1, centers Israel's security, 2, paints Iran as strengthened, and this being inherently sinister, and 3, demagoguing about a nuclear program or reinforcing the logic of U.S. and Israel hostility. These aren't gotchas, they're racist, morally stunted frameworks. The U.S. bombed a school, killing 150 girls. It attacked with provocation. It destroyed hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure, killed 4,000 plus with no moral or legal justification. No morally sound person should care what was achieved. This isn't a game of risk, Adam Johnson says, and he's right. Okay? We have to oppose this war on the moral front, on moral grounds. And we can also oppose the war on legal grounds. We could oppose the war on the reality that it is also leading to economic disaster. Okay? There's a million avenues. But the one thing Democrats consistently keep doing when they talk about the process, and they did this with Venezuela as well, okay? When they did this with Venezuela as well, they said, oh, well, Maduro's a tyrant. He's awful. He's a monster. We're glad that he's getting deposed, but we just don't like the way that Donald Trump did it. It's like when you give him the justification, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
Okay.
Ro Khanna absolutely cooked on this as well. He went on MS Now and he said exactly those words. I'm glad that there's at least someone saying the quiet part out loud, or the part that Democrats are refusing to say. Here it is.
What do you say to people who say the 25th Amendment or impeachment, as we have seen twice before with this specific president, when it's controlled by Republicans, that's just not a realistic scenario?
I think you're using things too tactically. you've been so immune? How about moral principle? How about that when a president threatens to blow up other nations, that we have to see some response to saying that we have a higher moral dimension, that there's something called conviction in politics, that the lives of the Iranian people matter, that the lives of people in Gaza matter, that the lives of people in Cuba matter, that when Donald Trump is echoing Gallant and calling people animals who live in Iran, that we will be a Democratic Party who says that is morally wrong. And when we don't say that, and when we hide behind proceduralism, and when we hide behind tactics, and we hide behind the fact that we don't have votes, then what we say to most Americans is we're not willing to fight for our vision for America, for our moral vision. You know who is willing to fight for his vision of America? Donald Trump. And you know why the Democrats keep losing? Because we don't have conviction in our politics. We don't have inspiration and passion in our politics. We've got people there 50 years who read the same scripts, put out the same bland statements. Get out. Let a new generation lead. You've been ineffective. The base doesn't like you. The base wants fighters. The base wants people with moral vision. And the only people the base are more upset with than Donald Trump is the ineffective leadership of the Democratic Party to stand up when a president of the United States is threatening genocide.
That's it. This is wall-to-wall bars, 1 minute and 34 seconds of cooking, okay? That's the message. You should not shy away from saying exactly this, okay? This is one of the best messages I've seen from any elected, speaking clearly about the demands that voters are making of their elected representatives to demonstrate moral courage, to demonstrate a vision, charting a better pathway, a better future for the United States of America, especially with our foreign entanglements, especially with our dealings with Israel and what we've done in Iran and many other places as well. The human element of this cannot be lost in the conversation. It's crazy to me, but it is objectively racist, right? It's objectively racist to just be like, well, yeah, we killed a whole bunch of school children or whatever, but at the end of the day, if we achieved our war goals, it would have been fine. Like, would it have been fine